As dawn broke over a quiet village in Normandy in 1944, a beast hid among the ruins of a shattered farm, patiently awaiting the advancing Canadian forces in armor. Then, when they were finally within range, the concealed terror opened fire. 2 consecutive shots resulted in 2 burning Shermans. Their crews were gone entirely. Then the vehicle emerged from the ruins. It was a Tiger II, commanded by Waffen SS troops. Sporting a devastating 88mm gun that could tear apart 6 inches of armor at ranges of 2,000 meters, the Sherman's 2 inches of protection stood no chance against the German behemoth. 2 more Allied tanks exploded, and the advancing Canadian infantry was neutralized by the quick bursts of the Tiger's MG-34 machine guns. Desperation quickly spread among the Allies as the enemy tank approached them. Standing 10 feet tall and with a length of 24 feet, the vehicle was utterly unknown to them. 2 Shermans opened fire, only to realize their 76mm guns merely scratched the sloped armor of the Colossus's protection that was more than 150mm thick. Unflinching, the King Tiger charged. It was its combat debut, and the crew would make sure the tank's reputation spread among the Allies. The development of the Tiger I tank was a direct response to Soviet armored vehicles that proved difficult for German panzers to destroy during the launch of Operation Barbarossa. First introduced in 1942, the 60-ton heavy tank ushered in a new age of armored warfare. It packed a powerful 88mm gun that could destroy any enemy tank at impressive distances, armor that was 120mm thick and impervious to most anti-tank countermeasures, and a top speed of around 45 km per hour made the ground and the enemy tremble when it set foot on the battlefield. Coupled with its square, castle-like shape and long cannon, the Tiger had a menacing appearance. However, Hitler's generals and tankers were not content with its power. They complained the KWK-36 gun was not the most potent version of the 88mm cannon and urged for a more devastating upgrade of the artillery piece. Hence, even before the Tiger I debuted over the battlefield, work had already begun on a successor. Enter the Tiger II, or Königstiger, the Bengal Tiger, the perfect blend between the sheer firepower of Tiger I and the sloped armor protection of the Panther medium tank. This behemoth was more significant, faster, and more devastating than its predecessor, weighing over 75 tons and sporting a longer-barreled KWK-43 88mm gun that could penetrate over 5 inches of armor at ranges of 2,000 meters. While the first Tiger featured imposing vertical armor, the Bengal Tiger incorporated the sloped armor found in the Panther and T-34 tanks, increasing its thickness to 6 inches or 185 millimeters. With a length of 24 feet, a width of 12 feet, and a height of 10 feet, the Bengal Tiger's silhouette was a thing to behold over a combat zone. The vehicle was armed with 2 7.92mm MG-34 machine guns with over 6,000 rounds of ammunition to obliterate enemy infantry and enhance its already powerful presence. Its turret took only 19 seconds to traverse 360 degrees, while the Tiger I took 60 seconds. Although slow for tank standards, it was a novel innovation for a heavy tank of its class. The Bengal Tiger was also more agile than the Tiger I and other tanks such as the American Sherman and the Soviet T-34. The V-12 Maybach HL-230 P-30 petrol engine allowed the vehicle and its 5-man crew to travel at 25 miles per hour. With its excellent blend of firepower, mobility, and armor, the German military believed the Bengal Tiger would change the outcome of the war in their favor. In many aspects, it would. Over 490 Tiger II heavy tanks were produced between 1944 and 45. Despite their short operational use, they left a lasting impression on military history, especially in tank warfare and armored vehicle development. The King Tiger was issued primarily to heavy tank battalions or Schwere Panzerabteilung units of the Heer and the Panzer Corps of the elite Waffen SS, with 45 vehicles split into 3 companies of 14 tanks. The last 3 Tigers were reserved for the battalion headquarters. For combat operations, the basic unit of the heavy tank battalions was the platoon, consisting of 3 to 4 tanks. The combat debut of World War II's most potent tank was during Operation Overlord, the Allied invasion of Normandy, northern France, in June 1944. Knowing the Atlantic Wall would not suffice to fend off the attacking forces, General Erwin Rommel and other commanders deployed all the armored vehicles they could afford to decimate their European counterparts. The 503rd Heavy Panzer Battalion, re-equipped with Tiger IIs, engaged Canadian troops during their Operation Atlantic offensive near Demouville and Roanne in late July 1944. With the support of German infantry, the 1st Company of the 503rd charged into battle against the Canadians, who, completely unaware of the introduction of the fearsome Tiger II, were frozen by its imposing silhouette, size, and sheer firepower. Although virtually impenetrable against any countermeasure carried by the Allies, 2 vehicles were lost in combat after being overwhelmed by Canadian reinforcements. Weeks later, 4 Tiger IIs from the 101st aided the infantry during a counterattack against American troops at Guitrancourt, where they quickly knocked out an M4 Sherman. Sporting a 75 or 76mm gun, the Sherman could not face the Tiger II and survive. Its gun was no match for its counterpart's 150mm thick front hull. Meanwhile, the Sherman's 75mm armor stood no chance against the Colossus's main gun. Shermans could only engage King Tigers when the numbers were on their side. Coupled with their superior maneuverability and speed, the key to the survival of Sherman units was to outnumber and outmaneuver the King Tigers, using the terrain and clever tactics. The Tiger II was also dispatched to the Eastern Front during the summer of 1944. The 501st Heavy Panzer Battalion was the first to employ them in combat against the Soviet Union. The Red Army heavily outnumbered the Axis troops in armored vehicles, artillery, and more power. More importantly, the Soviets were accustomed to launching wave after wave of tanks and infantry at German strongpoints until they were eventually overrun. King Tigers from the 501st had to resist the impetus of the Red Army during the Lvov-Sandomierz offensive aimed at expelling them from eastern Poland and Ukraine. Some of the tanks were tasked with destroying the Soviet bridgehead at the Vistula River, but were ambushed on their way to the objective by Soviet T-34s. During the skirmish, some Tigers that stowed rounds within the turret experienced round explosions and were rendered useless. As the Red Army push continued, it became clear that packs of T-34s and IS-2 tanks could successfully engage the Tiger IIs and destroy them with flanking maneuvers and close-range encounters. The Soviets could afford to lose tanks and engagements and still press their numerical and logistical advantage. Soviet tactics evolved to include combined arms assaults, using infantry and artillery to exploit the Tiger II's slower reaction times and mechanical vulnerabilities. For instance, multiple T-34-85s could swarm the Tigers from different locations and slowly but steadily close the gap between the German tanks before encircling them in close combat engagements. Although still highly vulnerable during frontal assaults against the impenetrable armor of the Tiger II, the T-34-85 could easily target the rear and sides of the German vehicle with its 85mm gun and exploit its slower turret traverse to inflict maximum damage and turn tail before being targeted. The real threat the Bengal Tigers faced was the IS-2 or Joseph Stalin II heavy tank. Developed as a countermeasure to the Tiger I, the IS-2 heavy tank was armed with a 122mm gun and a front hull that was 120mm thick. Nonetheless, the Tiger II's 88mm gun was superior in rate of fire and penetration, making it more effective in tank-on-tank engagements. While powerful, the IS-2's 122mm gun was less suited for engaging multiple targets quickly due to its slow reload time. Besides Normandy, the Tiger IIs were also deployed to counter Operation Market Garden, fighting against British paratroopers defending Arnhem. A British Piat anti-tank weapon knocked out one Tiger after being damaged by a 6-pounder anti-tank gun. Other Bengal Tigers also became an essential asset of Hitler's last gamble, the Ardennes Offensive of December 1944. Also known as the Battle of the Bulge, this operation highlighted the superior firepower of the Tiger II and its ability to dominate an exceptional number of enemy forces in open terrain. As per American records, a Tiger II tank was struck by an M36 Jackson's 90mm gun at least 8 times, yet none of the hits resulted in any injury or severe damage to the crew. However, one shot proved lucky, and the tank's gun was disabled, rendering it unable to return fire. Consequently, the tank crew had to evacuate the vehicle. There's no confirmed instance of the front armor of a King Tiger tank being penetrated, maintaining its perceived invincibility throughout World War II. On the Western Front, the Bengal Tiger reigned supreme, as virtually no American or British heavy tanks could face it head-on until the deployment of the M26 Pershing in 1945, and these tanks, too, were inferior to the German Giant. The Pershing featured armor that was between 102 to 114mm thick. Its armor was designed to protect against the Tiger's 88mm gun at standard combat ranges, though its effectiveness could vary depending on the angle and distance. The same occurred with its 90mm gun. It was a significant leap over the Sherman's 75 and 76mm main guns, but it still lacked punch at longer ranges. Nonetheless, it could deal a heavy blow to a Tiger II at close range. Both tanks represented the pinnacle of their respective countries' tank development during the war. Nevertheless, despite its imposing firepower, thick armor, and excellent speed, the Bengal Tiger's impact in the war was limited due to its late introduction in the conflict, its less than 500 production run, and suffering from several mechanical issues, including frequent breakdowns of its engine and transmission systems, and malfunctions in the cooling system that resulted in overheating. At nearly 70 tons, the Tiger II's size limited its mobility, especially in rugged terrain such as mud, snow, or dense forests. Some of the tank's shortcomings were corrected in later upgrades, but it remained unreliable. That aside, the Tiger II also faced logistical challenges from the start. The engine was highly fuel inefficient, consuming a large amount of fuel when Germany faced severe fuel and resource shortages. Due to its size and weight, transporting the Tiger II by rail or road required special arrangements, limiting the number of places it could be deployed quickly or efficiently. Although a technological marvel, the complexity and sophistication of the Bengal Tiger made it challenging to maintain and repair, especially in field conditions. It required significant resources, including spare parts and skilled mechanics, which were increasingly scarce as the war dragged on and casualties mounted up. Finally, the Tiger II was expensive and time-consuming, dragging resources that could have been better allocated to produce more tanks the Heer desperately needed for combat at both fronts. Putting armored vehicles aside, the focus on the Tiger II represented a strategic choice for which the Wehrmacht paid dearly. The emphasis on such technologically advanced and resource-intensive tanks may have diverted attention and resources away from other crucial military needs, including infantry support and air defense. Still, the Bengal Tiger II was the most powerful tank of World War II. It faced no opponent in the war zone, and although its reign was short, it remained undefeated in tank-to-tank combat. Unfortunately, its career was limited due to Germany's inability to upgrade it to a war that had already been lost by 1944. The lessons learned from the deployment of the Tiger II influenced post-war tank design, emphasizing reliability, mobility, and logistical sustainability, along with firepower and armor protection.